Your template has a lot of channels, and I can see EQ, saturation, compression. Like, what is your process?
I'm gonna choose one instrument, and I'm gonna see signal flow. It's here, it's going here, then it's going there. Here I've got this plugin loaded. I'll do a little bit of EQ and tape saturation, okay, but the actual mix happens right here. Some short gated reverb here, for example, a short reverb. The next one, mid reverb. I add a little bit of fresh air, a little bit of Shadow Hills. Is a MacBook Pro M1, 64 gigs of RAM, enough for orchestral work. For music and running a template 300-400 tracks, no problem. I would like to know some tips on how to achieve that massive Hans Zimmer style on the strings. I would never compare the level of quality, production, and genius of something like Inception by Master Hans Zimmer. Plus, on top of that, all the production value added after his genius and his creation. Obviously, after that there's a process, there's a recording session, Alan Meyerson, there's so much, and so obviously we cannot compare these 20 minutes, but this would be the 20% elements that make the 80% difference, and I think they set for a good start. I would say 3 things I can demonstrate a little bit. Well, hello everyone, we can get started. Let's start with Margareta. Regarding your response, in the hub for the question, is this 64 gigs of RAM M1 Studio enough for a orchestral work? Could you please detail what I run a decent template? Yep. So I run. Yeah. So there was a question in the hub, the group, regarding is a M1 and a MacBook Pro, I guess, or Mac Studio M1, 64 gigs of RAM enough for orchestral work? And the answer is yes. And to answer your question, which is, can you develop on, I run a decent template and I didn't have any problems. I'll kind of like expand my template here. But what I would do is, if you go to, you just like Mark, if you look for Mark Giovanni template best, I guess. Yeah, is this the best? Yeah, this one. For a while, we had an agency like that did our YouTube videos. I would record, I would send them and they would come up with the most creative titles and thumbnails. But muting everyone again. But it's this one. Is this the best orchestral template ever? Just click on this one. It's a 30 minutes describing my template, and I'm running all these templates in that MacBook Pro 64 gigs of RAM M1 computer. Then I moved into, I don't know if, well, right here sits the Mac Studio, which is 128 gigs of RAM now, and I like it better just because it does a better job with live video encoding. I said this several times, but for doing so with the MacBook Pro, the laptop, 64 gigs of RAM, and the now old M1 silicon chip, for music and running a template, the same template that I'll show right now, no problem. But for doing this plus Zoom, still no problem, but doing this plus Zoom plus streaming, that live video encoding was not great. With the M1, and that was the MacBook Pro M1 Pro processor, 64 gigs of RAM. The Mac Studio is 128 gigs of RAM, which it's not that big of a difference, really. It doesn't. But the processor is the M1 Max, and that has more of a buffer for live video encoding. So I felt a big improvement when it comes to live video encoding. That's it. Audio and processing plugins, sample libraries, etc. No big difference. It was perfect before. Maybe I can push it a little bit farther and I can reduce latency just a tad, but no difference. No big difference whatsoever. And my template is, I don't know. I'm seeing it's just expanded. So if we show all tracks, Let's see. How many tracks do we have? Well, I guess 300-400 tracks, something like this, template. And it's the typical approach, enable, disable tracks type of template. So it's all loaded and then disabled. And then I just enable the tracks that I need to work on for this particular cue. And, with the pros and cons of having a template like this. Pros, you can have it inside in one computer, no need of be pro, no need of a second computer, etc. So it's just Cubase, everything loaded. It's simpler routing, simpler everything. The cons is, well, the template file, the Cubase file gets bigger. So 100, 200, 300, 400 megabytes, the bigger the template. And so every time that you save, or if you have autosave, it'll take half a second, 1 second, a second and a half, 2 seconds. And well, that could be annoying for some people. No big deal for me. I hit save, wait a minute and a second and a half or two, and then I continue working. So that's it. That is, hopefully I could go way more into explaining my template, but I think that video does a better justice of explaining what I've got running at the moment. Specifically, how many tracks do you consider to be a decent template? More than 100, 2, 3, 400, something like this. Cool. Any luck with the Logic template building video for the composer in a week course? I have to check with Dirk on this one because he's the one that's actually working on this. So let me, Fede, if you could pick me on a Slack so I can follow up with Dirk.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I'm looking at getting an M3 128 MacBook Pro with 8 terabytes of storage. What should be more than enough? Oh, yeah. 100%. For music, yes. 100%. And here's that. So RAM. So when I moved to, back in the days, I used to, my template was all Mac based. But in 2011, I switched to PC. And I've been running PC for over a decade. So to me, kind of like the same thing. PC, Mac, they do the same thing. Some people like PC, some, it's more customizable, it's cheaper sometimes. And then some people prefer Mac, it's like less problems, works out of the box, blah, 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 the whole thing. At the end of the day, you can do the same thing with both systems. Both great. But then the M1 chip, that silicon chip, got released 4 years ago, and it was pretty revolutionary back then. Like, it was a quantum leap, in my opinion. Like, the first experience that I had with an M1 computer, it was actually running a decent template of my wife's MacBook Air M1 basic processor. And I was pretty blown away. And I also was editing 4K video and the whole thing. And I was like, whoa, this is impressive for a kind of like under $1,000 laptop. And I was impressed. And then I had a big major crash with, system corruption 2 years ago. And that forced me to rebuild my entire PC system and rebuild the template from scratch again, because the backups were corrupted as well. So, one of these things. And so I thought, well, now that PC, if I have to rebuild the PC, which is now a 4-year-old computer, if I have to put the time to rebuild this into an old system, may as well buy a new one. And now begs the question, should I continue PC or should I go with a Mac? And so back then I was traveling and I thought, let's try something crazy. Let's see if I can transition from like a desktop PC to a laptop computer. And the only laptop that could offer this kind of power back then was the M1 processor chip, the M1 Pro. That was limited to 64 gigs of RAM. But I went for it and I tried it and I successfully optimize the template to make it fit into a smaller machine with a more modern, powerful CPU. Was the M1 Pro 64 gigs of RAM laptop more powerful than the system that I had running before, which was a multi-computer, right? It was like I had a server. Sorry, I had a server and 2 slaves connected. B Pro, the whole thing. I had more than 500 gigs of RAM. So big system, more complex though, harder to run, more problems. So was it that small laptop more powerful? No, it was not. But was it enough to run a template 2, 3, 400 tracks? Yes. The only problem, video encoding. Other than that, it was great. And when I was transitioning, the only fear was 64 gigs of RAM. Is this going to be enough? Because transitioning from 500 gigs of RAM to 64, and obviously I thought it's gonna be the enable disable system, etc. But what happens at the end of the movie where you've got that bigger, that template with so many enabled tracks. Long story short, had no problem. The way Mac handles with the silicon chips, the way these chips handle RAM is very different than traditional RAM handling. And it's way more flexible. It's more about RAM pressure than RAM usage, because when there's a lot of usage, it starts offloading into the fast SSDs, and it fluctuates. It also allocates the most needed RAM allocation, like the most needed files into into RAM, and those that you are not using as much, it'll offload them from RAM into SSD virtual RAM. Anyway, long story short, it's very efficient, and 64 gigs of RAM did it for me. 128 more than will do it for you. So, and plus M3, it's just more modern. It's not that much more powerful than an M1. In fact, as those who are nerds and geek out on this, this big news, like for Apple, like the sales of M2s, all the laptops, all the MacBook Pros, M2s, it just plummeted. Like they were not selling computers because the M1s were so good that no one was upgrading. Like obviously, yes, the people who didn't have an M1 then went from Intel to M2s. They bought M2s, but most of the people with M1, there's no reason to buy an M3 right now if you get an M1, unless you are pushing the boundaries of that machine. And for audio producing, like rarely you're going to, unless you've got a very like a massive template or something like this. So M3 is better than M1, but it's not needed. I still run my M1 portable studio in my laptop, and no problem for exporting stems and things like this when I'm on the go. And this in the Mac Studio is an M1 Max. So M3 is awesome. But M1, you'll save a lot of money. I bought the M1 Max, 128 gigs of RAM, and I saved kind of like $3,500, like $3,000, because I was buying an older machine rather than buying the newer M2 back then. So it's equally as good, and you'll save a lot of money.
All right, thank you.
Yep, great question. Oh, hey William, it's good to see you. This this little thingy is one of the cheapest controllers that you can get out there, and I love it. The only thing is it moves around. You have to clean the kind of like these little rubber things, and then it doesn't move anymore. But it's called the MIDI Maker. I think it's called the Sparrow. The MIDI Maker Sparrow. The MIDI Maker Sparrow. And the one that I've got is the 5X100. So the construction, the quality is not like if you bought the quality. It's printed. You can. We've got something. Oh, I don't have the But let me see. Let's do this for a second. There you go. See that you can see a little bit of the. Let me see. I'm trying there. Anyway, you can see it's printed and it's not perfect.
Is the
and it,
quality of the faders good?
but the fader, yeah, good question. The faders feel good. It's not the best, but I like the resistance that they offer. It's it's 10 centimeters, so it's great, and it has both for panning. So it has faders and knobs. I think it's how much is this? Shop the 5. They have an 8 now. 110. No, the one with the. Where's the one with the all products? Let me see. This one, 175. So it's a pretty decent price for something like this. It's good. I love it. I continue to. You know that I used to have that gray one that was discontinued, and I loved it. But after a while, it just started triggering random MIDI data, and it was a pain in the ass. But yeah, the MIDI maker. It's good. I like it. Thanks.
Thank you.
The problems when doing music on a MacBook Pro. To me, I had this system with the threes. Let's see. So I had 1, 2, and 3 screens running off of the laptop. I had one of the screens directly from the HDMI port, and the other one of a converter that from Thunderbolt to which the USB-C to 2 HDMIs. I think it's called it's a display link thing. It's kind of like HDMI over USB kind of thing, and it's called display link. Display port. Thank you, Vincent. And that made the trick. Usually, the fun to me when I was composing, it would now blow, like I wouldn't hear anything. To me, when I was doing Zoom, like a class like this, I could hear the fan, and so I had a long cable, a long Thunderbolt, expensive cable. Those are expensive, and so I would, for the classes, sometimes I would move the laptop farther away into a desk next to my studio, so the mic would not pick up the sound. But yeah, it's a laptop, so it's a smaller body. It needs to evacuate heat. But I agree, Apple Silicon runs very cool compared to Intel. The older one, the Intel CPUs on laptops, those very, very noisy compared.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no, these computers are just amazing. The first time that I it was just a surreal experience for me. When you have been composing for a decade, this is the place where you compose, right? It's a room with equipment, speakers, screens, and a computer that you cannot move around because it's a desktop computer. The first time when I started building my template into the new laptop, the laptop was sitting on my desk, plugged, Thunderbolt, and from there to all devices. But still, it felt like big space, like a big machine's desk, everything, right? It's a big tool kind of thing, right? But when I had everything configured, it took me weeks. I remember one day I unplugged everything and I went to Starbucks, and I didn't thought about, well, if it's run in my studio, it should run here, right? I just need to switch the audio device. And I was on a Starbucks. I opened the template. I switched my audio device from the RME to my AirPods that I had with me. I hit play to a cue and it starts playing and it just blew me away because the first time in my life I had the entire template just portable and on a battery device. And it just, to me, it was surreal. That was 2 years ago. Right now, it just feels normal. But the first time that, it's just like, a decade ago, the first, like, we there was no Wi-Fi and all internet was cable, Ethernet. And the first time that outside your home you connect to internet, it felt surreal for those old enough to remember that. I'm, getting close to 40, just 37, but getting there. So the same thing. It felt surreal to me. So yeah, these machines are pretty amazing. Everyone, I would like to know some tips on how to achieve that massive Hans Zimmer style on the strings, such as Inception soundtracks. Sorry if my English is a little broken. No, that's okay. So, in what type of strings? Sustained strings or staccato strings? Like Pirates of the Caribbean type of strings, or more, the Inception also has some staccatos. So I'd love to know. Sustain, yeah. So sustain just it's going to be layering and layering and layering. What I would say, but I would say three things. Number one, you wanna. I can demonstrate a little bit, but do the trick that I've showed sometimes, which is ensemble patch and then layer. So start with an ensemble patch. So sustain the string is going to be big chordal type of strings. You're gonna have the triadic chord, the triadic closed chord on violins 1, 2, viola, and then you're gonna have the open octaves in the cellos and double basses. Cool. Use two sustained patches to create that kind of like ensemble chordal homophonic type of string spat. On top of that, layer at least violins 1 and cellos. But you can layer everything. So just have the ensemble patch and create that pad. On top of that, layer with a legato patches, like violins 1 section legato, and layer the line of the violin 1. Same thing with violin 2, viola, cello, and double bass. At the very minimum, do just violins 1, cellos, and double basses, and layer that on top. That's gonna add definition and open the mix, and it's going to make that string spat a little bit more alive. You're gonna hear more detail of each one of the parts, because the ensemble is going to make it sound big and massive, but you're gonna lose clarity with a little bit of depth of detail in a way. So layering the individual section patches, legato patches, will add that detail that you want. And on top of that, you're gonna want to EQ those strings a little bit and soften them a little bit. I like the Pultec EQ for let's see if I have it active here. No. There you go. Yep, I like this one with these settings. Do I have it active? No, let me just activate it. Okay, so let me put it right here. Okay. Let's see. MIDI. So for example, if we recorded something like this, and then we'll talk about expression in a second, but let's record something. Let's see. Okay, let's do this. Tempo. Do I have space to record here? Yep. Tempo. Let's do 60. 60, please. Okay. Let's do 85. Okay, cool. Okay, so we got this guy. Okay. Let's so one voicing, two two expression. So if we see kind of like Lord of the Rings, Howard Shore type of going up the first chord, going down the second chord, going up the third chord, going down the fourth chord. Okay, so this kind of thing. So connecting two chords, two entire bars. The first one going up, the second one going down. Usually what we would have is, up and down in every chord, up and down. For this type of sound, bigger, more epic, more cinematic type of thing, we're going to go up the first one and down the second one. You can have a little bit of a drop here in between them to help connect, but in this case, up, down, first, second. That's the second thing. Third thing, you're gonna soften the strings a little bit. See? Sorry. So you're gonna soften them a little bit. I like Pultec very much for something like this. And then finally, you're just gonna layer. Let's see, violins, one legato. This guy here. See, it's active. Yep. Okay, let's do this. So I'm gonna have this guy here for the violin, this guy here for the cello. Cello long, this will do. Cello long. Yep. And then we'll also do the double basses just to enhance that bottom end. So I'm gonna select all of this. I'm gonna go here, and I'm now gonna select violin 1, and I'm gonna layer this note here. One, then let's do cello now. So I'm gonna go cello. Again. Too much. I got a little bit excited. And then double basses. Let's see. And see how the inner lines add to this. I'm gonna mute this and you'll see. And now I'm gonna start mute it and I'll bring them in. But also the solo strings without the ensembles are a little bit weak. So it's good, but not. So it's a combination. So a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I would say also a good, nice reverb would help. Let's see what we've got here. So let's see behind the scenes. And let's see. Sorry. Here. So we've got the biggest thing is we've got, in this case, cinematic room spaces dark cathedral, but with a 2.3 second on the strings. If we wanted that, if for this type of texture, we could go with something longer. And it would work because it's low chordal path, a strings path, and it would make it a little bit more Inception. And there you go. It's still, needs work, and I would never compare the level of quality and the production and genius of something like Inception by Master Hans Zimmer, and plus on top of that all the production value added after his genius and his creation. Obviously there's a process after that. There's a process. There's a recording session. There's an Alan Mayer song. There's so much after, and so obviously we cannot compare these 20 minutes into a multi-million-dollar kind of like production. And I'm just talking about the music, but this would be the if we are talking 80-20, 80% 20%. This would be the 20% elements that make the 80% difference. And I think they set for a good start. Does this help? Ah, awesome. What else? ¿Qué más? What do we have? And feel free to, if you, well, we've taken the me reading the chat route this week, but feel free to, as per usual, to raise your hand and ask questions if you want. Okay, cool. Help here. That's fantastic. Good morning. Yeah, obviously the sample library that you use will make a difference as well. That fader set to control the expression MIDI TC. So yes, two faders. Yes and no. Yes, this is expression. This is going to be modulation. So I go with expression and modulation at the same time. Adds a little bit more. For some libraries, for example, for cinematic studio strings, I find myself using just modulation and a tad of expression. For other older libraries, I found myself using more of both of them because it adds more realism and dynamism. Theoretically, you should not need to use this, but practically, in the way the libraries are built, which is basically a simplification of the real thing, the infinite dynamic layers that a violin or a violin section or a string section could do, not to mention brass, that dynamic range and the infinite number of layers in between the piano, mezzo piano, all the way to the fortissimo. In a sample library is simplified into 3, 4, 5 dynamic layers, and then to go from one layer to the next one in terms of dynamics, it's literally a crossfade transition, which is the most fake thing that you could ever imagine. It's that does not exist in the real world. But this is the way that with a machine, with a sampler, this is the way to emulate this. And it's great, it's perfect, it's fine. This is our tools, that's what we use to create this type of music, that sometimes is a recreation of the real thing, and sometimes it's just pure, well, this is my instrument, and I'm creating music with this instrument. There's nothing wrong with using sample libraries. It's just a different tool, it's a different instrument. But sometimes when we are trying to recreate and get close to the original realistic orchestral sound, well, because sample library is a simplification of the real thing, because of the way they have been built, then enhancing the modulation, which is modulation CC1, which controls crossfading between the different dynamic layers, to get a little bit technical here, to enhance that, which supposedly should do the trick, but it does it not perfectly. To help a little bit, I also do expression. Expression is just pure volume. It's volume, and it just adds a little bit of volume up and down to the crossfading of the dynamic layers. And if you look to sample libraries like Cinematic Studio String, Cinematic Studio Brass, things like this, and you go in there into how the library encoding and how it's built, the actual CC1 modulation, which does the crossfading between dynamic layers, it also has a percentage of volume. So that affects the actual sampler, the actual patch. So when you are doing just modulation in some libraries, they do crossfading plus volume at a percentage to kind of more emulate, because there's so many we could dive very deep into this topic. But recording, just the process of recording adds compression. Just depending on the mic that you are using, depending on the preamps that you are using, the board that you are tracking that recording with, the recording device. Obviously, if it's digital, there's no actual analog compression in there, but there is some reduction in the actual conversion from analog to digital. But if you are recording to tape, there's obvious compression in there. So there's a reduction of actual volume level that kind of disappears at a percentage by just the process of recording at a small percentage. But then on top of that, when you are coding and actually building the library, then also it part of the process disappears because of, again, the simplification. On top of that, there are some certain brands and libraries that they typically don't record the highest dynamic layer. It's very typical, common examples of that are some of the beautiful sounding Spitfire libraries, but many of them, the triple 40 is just not being recorded, especially sometimes with brass. And there's a reason for that. Like it's just extremely intense for musicians to record sample libraries, and specifically for brass players, especially when you get to the higher notes. It's just intense. It is brutal to record samples for a sample library. So a recording session for a sample library is brutal for musicians. And so sometimes it's just not doable, or sometimes it's in agreement. Some layers do not get recorded. Otherwise, you don't get me to record for this library kind of thing. And this is real. On top of that, there's, depending on where this library gets recorded, if it's in one of the major hubs like UK or LA, like recording in LA, for example, library is one of the hardest things. You cannot do it Union. Like Union, the only ones that achieved it was Cine Samples back in 2010, and they recorded these amazing, beautiful recordings of the Cine Samples, Cine Brass, Cine Strings, and Cine Woods. With its pros and cons. Those who know these libraries, some love them, some hate them. The out of tune. I personally, I like them. I still use them. There's good things and bad things, consistency, etc. But it's beautiful recordings in the Sony scoring stage with LA musicians. Union. But it's very hard. And again, Union rules. LA, UK, Abbey Road. That thing, when that got recorded, it was because of COVID. And again, just look at the number of layers, and especially the highest. Anyway, I'm digressing. Yes, I'm using modulation for crossfading and expression. Anyway, it's just fun. Sorry. Nerd alert. If you've got any questions, just raise your hand on Zoom. Those really great marks sample libraries are using. So for the sustain the strings, it was the old the Spitfire Symphonic Strings library, the original one. And then for the legatos, it was Cinematic Studio Strings. It was a tad too bright for my taste. When I was combining both, I would like to add a little bit to reduce a little bit of the top end of the Cinematic Studio Strings. Did I say LA scoring strings? Cinematic Studio Strings. So the legato, Cinematic Studio Strings, the sustains, the ensemble patch from the Spitfire Symphonic Strings. Do you combine the same library but with different mics to achieve that effect? Not really. If I show this to you, they are all using the typical kind of like Room Plus. Let's go here. Let's open one of these libraries. This one, for example. Oops. Okay. Oops. What's going on? Okay, my mic is fading on me. There you go. So, in this case, for the legato violins one section, it is just the patch pretty much out of the box with the mix setting. So I am not the mix basically is a combination of room and main a little bit, and not much of the spot mics. And the same thing for the ensemble. So it's all ensemble. It's all. I'm using the Deca 3 wide and surround mics with a little bit of the closer mics. Now, the difference between patch number 1 and the other set of patches is that patch number 1 is an ensemble patch where I've got the entire string section. It's a patch that has double basses, cellos, violins, violas, violins, the whole thing, right, built into one patch. And that's the first patch. And the second group of patches, they are actually individual patches where I've got, the violins 1 patch legato, and then the cellos, and then the double basses legato. And what the ensemble patch does is that as you are performing and recording dynamics to an ensemble patch, it feels like they are all together in the same room at the same time, because that's the way they got recording, that you are performing more than one voice at the same time. Whereas where you are recording the legato patches on top, they add the individuality, if that makes sense. And by the way, this also, I think, yes, so the same concept can be applied to short notes. And in that case, I like to play a little bit more with, let's see. if we are going for kind of like remote control type of, Transformers type of sound. Steve Jablonsky, right, in Transformers. Or Pirates of the Caribbean. Type of... I forgot the melody. Yeah. Oh. So this is for the when we go from legatos or long notes to short notes, and for this bigger type of sound, what I like, or it's not like I've created this. It's just me trying to study as close as possible a type of sound and trying to recreate this. Sometimes it could come in handy, but in this case, what I like to recreate this type of sound is to have a farther away type of a strings sound and the closer type of a string sound. And I've explained this several times, and I don't want to bore those who've seen this, but I've shown this sometime in the past. But basically, it's a combination of something like an ensemble patch. Again, same thing, ensemble patch and section patch. Ensemble, staccato, shorter strings type of thing. Right? Then on top of that, another ensemble patch that sounds even bigger. Right? So this is they are all old patches. This is Albion. Okay. And this one is Symphobia. To me, Albion has kind of like the size, and Symphobia has the aggression. So size, soft, kind of like Spitfire, and aggression. A little bit more of the aggression of the bow on the string, kind of that pressure. And then on top of that, I layer a very close section cello type of sound that, by itself sounds a little bit weak. Oops. And I should say dry. The only reason why it sounds wet is because that long reverb that we have. But it adds a lot. So without, with, it just adds that bite, and without, and with. There you go. Same again. It's stacking at the end of the day. But the stacking in a way is not just, I've got 3 strings libraries, I'm gonna stack 3 strings libraries. Like, okay, let's think about this. And it's just stacking sound in a way that makes sense. In this case, I need to fill out different spaces in this case, far and close. So it's a staccato sound that's bigger than life type of thing. This is not how an orchestra sounds. These 3 orchestras engineered in a way that it's pleasant to the human ear. And in this case, it's like a farther away, larger orchestra in a big space, like Albion in this case, recorded in Air Studios. Then we've got the second orchestra that has been performed is a little bit more aggressive. That's what I needed. These 2 orchestras kind of work well. Obviously, stacking also brings problems like frequency stacking, things like this. So there's some EQ going on there to avoid these problems. So there you go. We've got 2 orchestras. So it's a massive, lowest string staccato orchestras, 2 at the same time. So it's a massive ensemble. So that's already sounds bigger than usual. But then we're losing definition because it's just the more instruments, the less definition. And it's just another independent, isolated recording of a smaller group, cellos in this case, with a very close miking technique in a smaller space, drier space. And that's the sound that you get with this setup for type of thing. and without the reverb sounds completely dry. And then putting it all together, it creates that thing, that magic. I like it having loaded here, created, because this sound comes in handy, and I've got many of these, right? These sounds come in handy, and sometimes it's pre-built, and that's a template has 3 parts. Basically, it has the structure, so when you can export, so when you want to export, you can export quick stems, etc. It has all the back end, which is all the reverbs, EQs, etc. All the EQs to avoid frequency stacking, all the compressors, or all the tape emulations, all the saturation, everything, all the back end, the mixing side of things. So you've got the structure for exporting, the mixing for sound, and then you've got the sounds loaded. And the sound is not just violins one, the typical orchestral sound. It's the sound combinations that create your voice, that work for you, that makes you not just more agile and fast as a composer, but also it's actually what creates your sound. And obviously the template changes for every movie, for every project, because you'll create a series of tracks for that particular project, which is what's going to evolve your sound or create that unique sound from you for that particular project. But it's still 80% of the template that stays the same, and that is your sound. Your sound plus that uniqueness is what you create for one project. Project to project sounds different, but you still have your sound, which is what it's recognizable, which is that John Powell, right? Or Alessandro Desplat. It's like, oh, yeah, that no matter what movie, they always have something. That sound is that 80% template plus your technique as a composer, your uniqueness and your knowledge as a composer. So there you go. Digressing a lot today for whatever reason. I appreciate you being there. Dale, go ahead. Ask away. If you're there. If not, I'll... Without revealing the trade secrets, did you find this whole template or did you create it from scratch? It looks amazing. Would love to buy that template for Logic. Dave, I'm with you in a second. No, hey, no, not revealing any secrets. This to me has been like over a decade of evolving something that started small, and then I've been growing, and sometimes it gets too big, and then I reduce and eliminate and optimize, and the things that stay that are useful to stay, etc. But there are, this is what works for me. But I've definitely learned so much looking at some other composers, templates, etc. And one that if you ever want the fast track, and I have sold this template for like $7 at some point, and I think it's part of the some of our courses. And this is it's my template, and it works. And it for some people this could be this is an awesome template, whatever. If there is a template that I think is awesome, is the Dirk Ellert's template, and he has it for sale. For different sequencers. That is a template that I bought, and parts of my template I imported it from that template. So that's, if you want a very organized, awesome sounding with all the plugins loaded there, and that's someone who has actually put the time to, well, obviously Dirk's sound and production value is undeniable. But on top of that, he has put the time to make this template organized to put it for sale. So it's actually usable for someone. Yeah, this is usable for me, but if I give it to you, some things are not polished. But his template it's freaking awesome, and it's rock solid when it comes to it load and it works. I think he's working on a Logic version at the moment. Okay, Dale, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much. I have, it's kind of like a 3-part question kind of thing. But so for starters, do you think it's appropriate to layer, for example, if we had like a group of first violins, to layer a solo violin to add more realism, or it's kind of like a different effect, Do you think that is a good idea?
Useful. Yes, it could be done. Definitely. Sometimes it works better. But yeah, it's like the first chair, kind of like closer to the mic type of thing, right? When they, so it can come in handy. You could layer it in a very subtle way that you don't even notice, but at some point in the phrase, it kind of stands out a little bit, just like in real life. First chair is closer to the mic, and they stand out a little bit more. They lead. So with that leading, sometimes the mic catches up that kind of like more soloistic moment, and that's something that you could recreate with having that solo. It's very pleasant to the ear the first time that you add it. So we gotta, as composers, we gotta be careful with balance, because that solo instrument, sometimes the way it has been sampled, it has a little bit too much vibrato, which is more soloistic, but we don't want soloistic in a section. We want the first chair is different than solo violin, right? So we want first chair inside the sections, because it's very pleasant to our ear. As composers, as we are integrating that layer, gotta be very careful with balance and make it blend as much as possible.
All right, awesome. And can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go.
It's I was wondering if you can kind of go through your process when it comes to effects. I see you have like a lot of your template has a lot of channels, and there's EQ. I can see EQ, saturation, compression. Like what is your process? How do you know what basically how to put it on? You know, what is appropriate?
Awesome, fantastic question. Yes, sir. Let's go. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna choose one instrument, and I'm gonna see the signal the signal flow. We know what's it's here, it's going here, then it's going there. Here I've got this plugin loaded, etc., etc. Okay. What I Before I do that, and to further answer your question, what I would recommend is, we've got, if you go to cinematic composing, we've got this free training here on templates, and it explains my template in detail. So if you want to entertain yourself, there's a couple, like 3 or 4 hours of me explaining my template in detail. But let's choose, let's see, maybe. Okay, let's go with this guy. Cool. Let's see. So first of all, got these horns patch. The sound comes from, let's start bit by bit. The sound comes from stacking multiple patches. That's the first thing, okay? So that's the sound first. But then if we open this guy here and we open this guy, we're gonna see that horns, it has a little bit of EQ. If we bypass the EQ, sorry. So the EQ first adds a little bit of edge and aggression to the sound with these two bells here, and then it carves a little bit of the kind of like, muddy area, just quite a bit. So minus 3 dB at 384. Cool. So that's the first thing. After this, we have a little bit of tape saturation, as you can see here. So what this does is, I hate when bypassing, there's a little bit of that in between the bypass, but you could hear a little bit, we gain a little bit of width, which is interesting, and it happens with tape saturation sometimes. It also adds a little bit of tape saturation, and it adds a little bit of a
Buzziness.
yeah, exactly, buzziness to the sound, but in a pleasant way. So that's something that for this particular sound is useful. Sometimes I use another type of saturation, which is more like solid state type of saturation, which, for example, I use for the strings, or to be specific, with Let's see. Where? Oh, it is a. Yep, there you go. So this is the virtual channel, and this is basically an analog so like a solid state analog channel strip type of emulation, British, mixing board channel strip type of saturation, Brit. And it adds for the strings the type of saturation that I want. I use this one in particular for the Cinematic Studio strings series. So generally there's the sound, then there's a little bit of EQ, and that EQ does generally takes care of problems, generally it's avoiding the frequency stacking. So at the bare minimum, I'll cut a little bit in the mid-low area to avoid muddiness in frequency stacking. That's the first thing. Second, in the same channel strip, generally I'll have a little bit of tape saturation or analog saturation or something like this. And that happens to almost all tracks, and every single track, as you can see, there's going to be if you look up here, there's going to be a little bit of EQ, and if I don't have the EQ here, is because I may have it inserted. Okay, cool. So the next thing that I'll have, if we go back to this guy here, and we open this guy, so now it's going to, sorry, the next thing that's gonna do, this is gonna hit the group. So Epic Horns is gonna hit the horns group. I've got several. Oh, by the way, and then panning. So EQ, analog saturation or tape saturation, and then panning. I position the instrument, and then it'll hit the group, and the group may have some more things. So the group is here. If we go back again to Epic Horns, and then we go here, and we go and just hit one note, and we go here, you'll see that the horns, these horns patch, all the horns go to the, so the two horns, the one horn, the horns short patch, the horns legato patch, the horns rips, all these different patches in my template are routed to the horns group here. And so generally here I'll have a little bit more of EQ, a little bit more of tape saturation sometimes, and here's where the actual mix happens. Now I'm transitioning. The reason why I hesitate is I'm transitioning from, so for my entire life, or generally the process as a composer is you'll compose first, then you'll export the audio tracks, and then you'll import these audio tracks, these audio files, into a mixing project in Pro Tools, and then you'll do the mix, right? Or you'll send these audio tracks to mixing engineer, and they'll do the mix, right? Generally, those audio tracks are dry, without reverb, etc. But most of the times, as a composer, I don't even have the time or the budget or the luxury to have a mixing engineer. And it's a project where 60 minutes of music, 30 days or 3 weeks. And then it's like, as you are composing, you have to mix, and that mix then gets sent to DAP. And so generally, there's no time to mix. And so there's all the tracks loaded in my template. All the tracks hit the groups, and I'll have 30 groups or something like this. This darker blue at the end, those are my groups. And forever, the groups is where the mix happens to me. In my template, the tracks load the sound. This is where I've got all the sounds loaded. I'll do a little bit of EQ and tape saturation. Okay, cool. But the actual mix happens right here in this groups area. This is how it's been for me. And then after the mix happens, why? Why is that? Well, because for mixing, I do several things, right? It's EQ, it's panning, it's balance, etc. But there's plugins as well, and plugins add CPU processing. If I'm trying to mix track by track, then it's more plugins and this is just more CPU overload. And so I mixed in my stems, I had enough, I mixed here in my groups. I had enough groups so I could do so I could be flexible enough to mix my music, but I would keep it contained, so I would not need to use too many plugins for mixing here. So I've always mixed here. Now, with again the M1 computer is so powerful that this limit is not there anymore, and I have more flexibility if I mix track by track. It just gives me more flexibility. So I find myself, as you can see, turning off some of the plugins here and actually bringing to the actual track. But if I was to explain how I've been doing it, is I've got all my tracks loaded. I'll have EQ for eliminating frequency stacking problems. I will have the tape saturation, and then I move that track is routed to the groups. Here in the groups section is where the actual mix happens. And with mix, I mean a little bit of compression for percussion, things like this, right? So whatever is needed to actually mix. Here's where the mix happens. And then down here, as you can see, I've got all the sends that to the reverbs that we can find them here. Here's the effects groups. All these are my reverbs. And I've got some short gated reverb here, for example. I've got a short reverb here. The next one is the mid reverb, which is the seventh heaven. Then the next one is the one that I use for pianos. Then I've got the main orchestral reverb, which is the scoring stage. I've got a second orchestral reverb and a third, so it's the second orchestral reverb. And then we've got a third orchestral reverb, which is this one. And depending on the character that I want, I'll use another order. But I have them all loaded. Then I've got another reverb for long, high-pitched instruments, like long sustained strings and things like this. I've got another one for long, low-pitched instruments, like cellos and double basses. And I've got another one for brass that I like, this old IR1 for brass with a whole impulse response for long even decay that I like for certain brass libraries. And then I've got a super ultra mega long kind of reverb with this 10 seconds. It's not super long, but it's pretty long for when an instrument needs it, like a really long type of reverb. So I've got all these reverbs and I've got my sends set up that I'm going to be hitting different reverbs depending on how much I need. Now, again, the way I've been doing this for the longest time is from the group. The mix happens in the groups and I'm sending from the group, but more and more I'm transitioning to doing all the mix in the actual tracks. So this may disappear at some point. And then from the groups, so from tracks, hundreds, to groups, 30, the mix happens in the group, and from the group, then I hit the stems. From the groups are routed to the stems. And in the stems is what I will export to send to DAP, to the DAP stage for DAP mixing process. So from these groups, they hit these guys here, which is orchestra, percussion, synths, pulses, bass and sub-basses, and others. Sometimes this will have different names and I'll organize things differently depending on the project. And as you can see, there are plugins again here, plugins. There are plugins again here, and this is my mastering chain. Now, the mastering chain does not happen here in the master. This last track here is the master bus, is the master export. I do not do the mastering here because what I need is when I send my stems and master, when I send my stems and master to the DAP mixing engineer, I need for them to be able to play back my stems and they need to sound exactly the same as the master bus. So the stereo master export and the sum of the stems need to sound the same if they A, B. So the mastering, if the mastering happened in the master bus, in the master stereo bus, it would change the sound for that for the master, but not for the stems. And so what I do instead is I have the mastering plugins in each one of the stems. It's pretty much duplicated. So I have a copy of my mastering plugins 5 times. and then the result of that hits the stereo bus, and that prints the stereo master bus. But when I export, I export the master and I export the stems, and that's what I send to the DAP mixing engineer. What is my mastering chain? Well, for non-percussive elements, like for example orchestra, I will have a little bit of Shadow Hills with the preset mastering medium, I think it's called. It's a 17, I think, or no, 22. Mastering medium PGM. This is the one that I'll use. Then I'll have a little bit of tape saturation. I like to add a little bit of soothe that I have to activate when I want to export, which is this one here. And I just deactivate it because when I am composing, it adds 44 milliseconds of latency, which is a no-no when I'm composing. So I need to deactivate this guy as I'm composing, but I activate for the export. And then I add a little bit of fresh air, depending at the low level generally, but depending on the track, on the style. If it's more action, sometimes it has a little bit more brightness. If it's more slow, it's a little bit more mellow. But this adds a little bit of just air, brightness, and definition.
Does it add? Is it a saturator or is just
no, just brightness? Let me show you. Let's go for something very obvious like strings. This guy. Let's see. Okay, cool. Boom. And if we hit this guy, let's see.
I see. Okay.
And it gotta be very subtle, but it's just that final touch of bright. It's the typical exciter that you would have in a mastering plugin.
Thank you so much. Do you have any resources on making a template like this for Logic?
For Logic in particular, no. But the same concepts apply. What I would say is, because in Cubase I don't explain, well, hit this button and do this, but I explain the structure and the what and the why and how I did it, and I explain all the behind the scenes and all the organization. And so by watching this, if you know Logic, you should be able to do the same things. At the end of the day, ascend is ascend and a group is a group.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, but don't think that you have to. You need something like this to start, or don't even think I'm gonna create something like this. This starts small and then it evolves. Building something like this, you'll make mistakes because this is not this. I wouldn't know how to use something like this if this wasn't my template. I would start something with something small, and then working on a project, you realize you need something else. You add that something else, and if it's useful, it stays in the template. And this grows and grows and grows, and then it's a process of eliminating and optimizing, and this is how it becomes your tool. That makes you more efficient at the end of the day. But this is big. Like, this is like just looking at this, like, this is a lot of work. Yeah, this is lots of hours. It's an evolution. So don't need something as big as this. All right, cool. Gotta go. Let's see if there's been a fantastic chat. Let me see if there's. I love the questions. Really great questions. Am I missing anything big? Would you be able to go through the effects of the instruments? Great. Do you need to use pitch bend, create long realistic glissandos for strings? I generally, for long realistic glissandos, gotta use a library that has long realistic glissandos, actual recordings, performance patches type of thing, rather than pitch bend. Pitch bend will do the trick, but I use pitch bend sometimes for kind of like a more modern hybrid sound, and I like, pitch bending strings and pitch bending synths in creating that type of more, modern hybrid sound, because it is not realistic. It's more effect type of thing. But yeah, high quality legatos patches sometimes will have portamentos. It is not the long glissando, but sometimes if this is the effect that you want, that is good. Cine samples in a price, industry price. Yeah. The cine sample Cineprice, it's great, fantastic, sounds great. There's I really love Cinematic Studio Brass, and it's just such a great library and sounds so good. But if you compare it to Cinebrass from Cine Samples, that brightness and that Hollywood type of sound is not there. In my opinion, Cinematic Studio Brass is a way better sample library. But there's something in the sound quality of Cine Brass that's not there. And it's just the scoring stage, the musicians, the instruments, and the mic choice. Those all vintage Neumann M50s that Dennis Sands used with that, vintage capsule that over time degrades, and so it just enhances the high frequencies a little bit more, and that's very typical of that Hollywood sound. Just it's not there in the Cinematic Studio Brass, which is a way better library. It's much better built, and it's easier to use, right? But some of that, brightness in the staccatos for the trumpets, or for horns, things like this is not there in Cinematic Studio Brass, for example, or other brass libraries. That's the middle spiccato library. Good question, William. Thanks for asking. I didn't mention is the very old LAS scoring strings spiccato patch. Yeah, there you go. The spiccato patch inside the LAS scoring strings. Thanks, Fede. Which rivers?
Do you ever take the Synchron libraries?
Have I ever used, or do I have taken the Synchron libraries?
Yeah.
Is that the question? I've
Yes.
no, I have not used them. Have you used them?
Yes, the brass are amazing. The strings are very bright, and it's just a different sound. But it's quite amazing. And
And
the one,
it's great sampling from BSL in general. I've used the old school dryer libraries, not the Synchron. It's at the end of the day, it's different sound. It is, and using it in a way that adds to your palette, I guess.
I think they're not an end all, but they're a nice supplement to the other libraries.
Well, there you go. Good point. Really good point. My opinion. Cool. Bahala. Yeah. Bahala is cheap, is good. Reasonably priced. Exactly. There you go. The template by Dirk Ellert. I think Dirk.
Yeah, someone got me on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. There you go. So yeah, the CTO scoring template somewhere. I guess this here. There you go. The tune. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, tape. This is great. This is a great explanation. I love it. Never explained it like this. I I like to I like to explain tape saturation as a clean acoustic guitar. You strum the guitar and you can hear the 6 strings, right? Or even an electric clean guitar, right? Clean sound guitar. Boom, you can hear the 6 strings. If you add distortion, which is saturation on steroids. Saturation is before distortion, and you hit that power chord, and it feels like one note. It's one thing. Saturation kind of like brings things together. And for in a context of orchestral programming, where it's we're supposedly emulating an instrument orchestra, which is a one big instrument, which is a mass of people playing at the same time in the same room, right? The same emotions. So that saturation, it kind of like, plus when an orchestra gets recorded, all those mics get recorded in a tape machine or digital, but through a mixing board, analog mixing board. And there's bleeding, right? Especially in tape, there's bleeding between tracks, and so all these elements that kind of like create of that sense or that feeling of that one big thing, the orchestra performing at the same time, at the same space, with the same emotion. To me, saturation, it's more theoretical than real, but to me, saturation does a little bit of that. It kind of like blends them together a little bit. It's more philosophical than real. It's definitely Guy's explanation is much better than mine, but I like to think it that way. Anyway, all right. Just wanted to say, 41 of us here. Just wanted to say thank you. Thanks for being here, for hanging out with me, for the great questions, for the participation. Thanks for the interaction as well in the chat and helping each other. It's been amazing to me. It's always, I appreciate you being here. It means a lot to me. Your time is your biggest asset, so I appreciate that you're being here. Other than that, have a fantastic, wonderful rest of the week and a beautiful weekend. Enjoy your time, write great music, have fun with family, and talk to you soon. I'll see you next week. All right. All right. See you all. Bye bye. Have a
Thank you,
great
Mike.
weekend. Thank you guys.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye.